They said they saved me a seat, said it wouldn't feel like Christmas without me. Come spend it with us, they said. It started with a phone call I didn't expect, not after 3 years of quick holiday texts and the occasional blurry photo of a snow-dusted lawn. It was Greg, my son. His voice sounded like warm cider, left out too long, still sweet, but something about it had cooled. "Hey, Mom," he said, stretching the word like it was unfamiliar in his mouth. "We were talking about Christmas and, well, the kids really want you here this year." I didn't answer right away. Not because I wasn't thrilled to be asked, I was. It's just that when someone remembers you out of nowhere, the joy has to squeeze past the suspicion. He went on quicker this time. "Madison's got the house all decorated. We've even set up the guest room for you, with a new quilt and everything." I imagined the room, probably the small one down the hall with the creaky vent. It didn't matter. The idea that I had a room, a space, was enough to send a tightness blooming in my chest. "We really want you here," he said more quietly this time, like it had just occurred to him that he meant it. I smiled, even though he couldn't see it. "I'd love that, Greg." "Great," he said, some of the brightness returning. "It's gonna be a full house, just like old times." That night, I pulled the fruitcake tin down from the top shelf. It was dented on one side, the lid slightly warped from years of use, but it still held the smell of nutmeg and clove and orange zest, the way memory holds warmth. I hadn't made fruitcake in 3 Christmases, not since my hands started trembling when I grated ginger. But that night, they were steady. I chopped and stirred and wrapped it in parchment like I always did, tying it with red thread and tucking a note underneath the lid. It read simply, "Still sweet inside." I packed lightly. The blue cardigan I only wore on holidays, my travel-size lavender lotion, the knit scarf. Emma made me in college, the one that never matched anything, but always made me feel held. And I brought the fruitcake, of course. I wrapped it in a dish towel and tucked it into my carry bag like a small, sacred offering. 3 days before Christmas, I called Greg to confirm. No answer. I left a message. Just wanted to check the plan. Looking forward to seeing everyone. An hour later, a text arrived. "Yes, same address. Drive safe if the weather gets bad." Madison says hi. I read it 3 times. No punctuation after hi. That was her way, casual, breezy, like nothing ever warranted a full stop. But I didn't mind. I was being invited, not out of guilt, not out of necessity, out of something that sounded, however faintly, like want. And so I packed my car early Christmas Eve morning thermos of tea in the cup holder playlist of old carols humming low, and drove the 2.5 hours to their home just past the hills outside Trenton. I imagined the porch light on, the kids running out in pajamas and mismatched socks, the kind of welcome that didn't need words, the kind of welcome I hadn't had in years. By the time I turned onto their street, the sun was lowering behind a sky smeared in gold and gray. I recognized the neighbor's inflatable reindeer, half deflated, now sagging toward the snow like it had given up. Their mailbox still had the dent from the year the plow hit it. I smiled. Everything looked the same. Everything except for Greg's house. The driveway was empty. No lights. No wreath on the door. Just silence. I parked anyway. Sat for a minute with the engine ticking beneath me. Maybe they were out getting groceries. Maybe the power was out. Maybe they'd left a note. I walked up the steps, careful, as they always iced over near the edges, and rang the bell. Nothing. I knocked, waited, knocked again. Still nothing. I stepped back, looked around, then opened my phone. I scrolled, and there it was. A photo posted 2 hours earlier. The family bundled in matching scarves, standing in front of a fireplace I didn't recognize. Caption: Cozy Cabin Christmas. Just us, unplugged and grateful. My hand tightened around the phone. In the corner of the photo, I could see stockings hung in a row, each embroidered with a name, none of them mine. It wasn't the first time I'd been left out, but it was the first time I let myself admit that's what it was. I don't remember starting the car again. I just remember the feeling, that quiet, stunned kind of hum that lives between the ribs. The kind that says, you knew. You just didn't want to believe it. The street felt smaller on the way back out. The houses leaned in too close, like witnesses trying not to stare. The inflatable reindeer looked like it had fallen asleep from disappointment. I didn't know where I was going, not at first. But my hands found the steering wheel, like they were moving from muscle memory, like they remembered how to protect me long before my heart did. A few miles out, I spotted a diner. It had a flickering neon open sign, half buried in snow. There were no holiday decorations, no garlands, no carols. Just a tired little building, square and squat, with a cracked sidewalk and a salt-stained door. But it was warm and open and not asking me to smile. I parked, slid the fruitcake tin back into my bag, stepped inside. The bell above the door gave a weak jingle. Inside, it smelled like coffee that had been on the burner too long and grilled onions that would live in your coat for a week. A teenage couple sat at the far end, laughing into milkshakes. A man in a delivery uniform hunched over a bowl of chili. The woman behind the counter looked up when I entered and gave me a nod. "Sit anywhere, hon," she said. I chose the booth by the window. The vinyl seat cracked slightly under me. I didn't take off my coat. She came over with a menu, though I didn't need it. Any specials, I asked, mostly to say something. "Roast turkey's almost gone," she said. "But I've got grilled cheese tomato soup and pie. Apple or pecan." I looked down at my gloves, then up at her. "Pecan, please. And a cup of tea if you've got it." She smiled, scribbled, and walked off. The table was sticky. My phone buzzed once. I didn't flip it over. When the pie came, it was lukewarm and lopsided, the whipped cream already melting into a puddle. But I took a bite, and then another. And somewhere between the third and fourth, I realized this was the first Christmas pie I hadn't made for someone else. The crust was too thick, the filling a little too sweet. But it was mine in the sense that I had chosen it, paid for it, eaten it with both hands on the table, not hovering to pass plates or cut slices. And it was enough. I stayed in that booth for almost an hour, watched the snow blow sideways outside, watched the waitress refill the delivery man's coffee without being asked, watched the couple across the room leave brushing crumbs off each other's jackets. I watched myself too in the reflection of the window, not as someone discarded, but as someone slowly returning to herself. When I finally stood to leave, the waitress slid a small paper bag across the table. "Second slice," she said. "On the house. Merry Christmas." I blinked. "Oh, I didn't ask for." She shrugged. "You looked like you needed one." I smiled. "A real one." "Thank you," I said. She winked. "Eat it before the year ends. Resolutions ruin good pie." The air outside bit sharper now. I pulled my coat tighter bag in one hand, fruitcake still inside, like some strange relic from a life that hadn't happened. I didn't head home. Not yet. Home felt like a question mark, and I wasn't ready for punctuation. Instead, I pulled into the lot of a roadside motel. One of those places with weekly rates and a soda machine buzzing in the lobby. The kind that doesn't ask for explanation, just ID and a card. The man behind the counter handed me a key to room 6. "You got heat?" I asked. "Barely," he said. I nodded. "That's enough." The room smelled like mildew and soap, but the heater clicked on with a slow cough. There was a chair, a bed, and a television that hummed louder than it played. I peeled off my coat, sat on the edge of the mattress, and took out my notebook, the one I kept for grocery lists and things I never said out loud. I opened to a fresh page and wrote, "I am not a placeholder. I am not a maybe. I am not the extra seat you forget to count." Then I underlined it. Twice. I didn't cry. Not that night. I lay on the bed in my clothes blanket pulled to my chin, the second slice of pecan pie resting on the nightstand beside me, like quiet proof that something sweet still waited when you didn't expect it. Somewhere in the distance, a train passed. Low and long. I listened to it fade, then let the quiet settle around me like new snow. Not untouched, but finally, undeniably, mine. They didn't leave me by accident. They just didn't expect me to notice. I woke before the sun, as always. Old habits don't care about heartbreak. Even in a strange bed with a heater that wheezed like it had a smoker's lungs and a blanket that smelled faintly of antiseptic, my body still insisted on being useful by 6. I made the motel coffee. It tasted like cardboard and grit, but it was hot. And I was still here. I checked my phone. 2 missed calls from Greg. A single text, "Mom, I'm so sorry. We thought you knew we changed plans. There was a mix-up. Can we talk?" There was no mention of the photo. No mention of the locked house. No acknowledgement that I had stood in the cold with a cake in my hands and a name missing from the mantel. Just confusion. As if I had disappeared. I didn't respond. Instead, I got dressed, smoothed my cardigan, brushed the sleep from my eyes, and drove to a diner near the highway. Not the same one as last night. This one was brighter, newer, full of people who didn't know me and wouldn't ask why I looked like someone who had just been untethered. I sat by the window and ordered tea and a scone. I didn't scroll. I didn't wait. I took out my notebook and opened to the page from last night, the one that said, "I am not a placeholder." And beneath it I wrote, "I am not the one who always understands. I am not a second option. I am not here to make others feel whole while I fracture." I closed the book and folded my hands. And then I made a list. Not of groceries, but of names. Greg, Madison, Emma. Only 3, but each name carried weight. Next to Greg's, I scribbled mortgage cosign 2011, transmission repair 2015, private preschool deposit, Ruby never repaid. Next to Madison's flight to her mother's funeral, care basket after surgery, no thank you. Next to Emma's phone, calls just to talk, a birthday card every year, the scarf, and finally, a 4th line. Not a name, a sentence. Love doesn't survive in places it's asked to earn its seat. By 10 o'clock, I was standing outside my bank. The parking lot was icy, but I moved slowly, steadily. Inside, it was warm and sterile and full of piped-in holiday music, trying too hard. A young man at the counter smiled like he was trained to. "Good morning, ma'am. How can we help you?" I smiled back. "Hi. I'd like to speak to someone about my accounts. All of them." He blinked, nodded, and motioned to a waiting area. A few minutes later, I was seated in a glass-walled office across from a woman named Carrie, who looked like she did yoga at lunch and had never once left someone standing on a porch with a fruitcake. "What can I help you with today, Mrs. Eleanor?" "Just Eleanor." She nodded, professional. I looked her in the eye. "I want to cancel all automatic transfers to my son and his family. Starting today." She hesitated. "All of them. Yes. All. The recurring gifts, the tuition assist, the supplemental insurance, everything, except the charities." Another pause, then a quiet, "Understood." It took 15 minutes. 15 minutes to undo years of guilt masquerading as generosity. When she was done, Carrie glanced at the screen and said, "There's also a power of attorney on file." "Gregory." I nodded. "I want that revoked." She didn't ask why. She didn't need to. She printed the form, handed me a pen, and I signed my name without a single tremor. When I left, the wind had picked up again. But it felt different now. Not punishing, just honest. I drove home. Not to their home. Mine. The porch light I'd left on out of habit still glowed like a quiet witness. I stepped inside and closed the door behind me. The house smelled like lavender and old wood. Like safety. I took off my coat. Set the fruitcake on the counter. Still untouched. Still intact. I lit a candle on the kitchen table. Not for prayer, not for ritual, just for light. Then I opened the drawer next to the fridge, the one labeled important. Inside were files. One labeled Greg, one labeled Emma, and a blank one just marked Legacy. I took out a pen, and I began to write. To whom it may concern, this is not an act of punishment. This is an act of preservation. They didn't come to make things right. They came to see if I was still useful. The silence worked longer than I thought it would. For 3 days, I heard nothing. No more texts. No more calls. Just the sound of heat ticking through the radiators, the quiet hum of my own thoughts returning like birds after a storm. I cooked simple meals. I took short walks bundled in my coat. I re-threaded buttons on my old cardigan, not because they needed it, but because my hands wanted to make something whole. On the 4th day, the knock came. 3 soft raps. Hesitant. Not the mailman, not a neighbor. The kind of knock people give when they want something, but know they've lost the right to ask. I opened the door. It was Madison. Hair-curled makeup, flawless scarf, looped just so. Her heels were too narrow for the icy sidewalk. She carried a tote slung over one shoulder and a practiced look of concern. "Eleanor?" She said, her voice doing that thing where it tries to sound tender, but lands just south of sincere. "Can we talk?" I didn't answer, just stepped aside and let her in. She looked around the living room like she was taking inventory. Same furniture, same smell of lemon wood polish and old paperbacks. But something in the air had shifted, and I think she felt it. I sat on the couch. She did too, perching on the edge like a guest instead of a daughter-in-law. "I know you're upset," she began, smoothing the fold of her coat, "and I just want to say, This whole thing with Christmas was a misunderstanding. I said nothing. She rushed on. Greg thought your flight was later. We didn't realize you'd already gotten there. We thought maybe you changed your mind. And the cabin I asked. She blinked. What? The photo. The caption. Just us. The mugs. The pajamas. The missing stocking. Her face flushed for the first time. That was just a family moment, she said. We didn't mean to hurt you. But you did. A pause. Well, yes, but her voice brightened artificial. We think we need to move past that now. The kids miss you. Greg's been calling. We're all just concerned. I let out a small breath, almost a laugh. No, Madison. You're not concerned. You're surprised I stopped filling in the silence. Her posture stiffened. I came here because we want to make things right. No. You came here because for the first time I didn't show up and pretend everything was fine. Something flickered behind her eyes. Annoyance, disbelief, fear I couldn't tell. Didn't matter. She sat back, crossed her legs. Greg said you made some changes, financially. I tilted my head. I did. To your accounts, to other things. Yes. A pause. And he's not in them anymore. No. She blinked. Do you think that's fair? No, I said. I think it's honest. She stood then, abruptly. The performance dropped. I'm sorry you feel this way, she said. No, I said, voice calm and steady. You're sorry I stopped accepting less than I deserve. She opened her mouth, closed it, gathered her tote. At the door, she paused. Greg's really worried, she said. He should be, I replied. Not because I'm gone, but because I'm not coming back. Then I closed the door, not with anger, but with finality. That night the phone rang. Greg. I let it ring, not to punish, just to protect. The next morning, I brewed tea, sat at the table with the legacy folder, and began to draft the letter that would go with the trust. Not legal, personal, a statement of intent. To whoever reads this after I'm gone, this is not punishment, this is not spite, this is clarity. I gave and gave and gave and was thanked with distance. I'm choosing now to give to those who showed up without asking for more, to the ones who didn't forget me at the door. Later that day, I went to the notary. It was tucked in the back of a mailbox shop next to bubble wrap and rows of glittery greeting cards. The man behind the counter wore a sweater with a snowman on it and didn't ask questions. He just stamped what needed stamping. I walked home slowly, paper envelope pressed to my chest under my coat. The wind had picked up again, slicing through the bare trees, but I didn't shiver. At home, I poured soup into a bowl, lit one candle, and sat at the table alone. But this time, not lonely. There is a difference. And I had finally found it. Winter passed slowly. Not in sadness, but in stillness. I kept my routines, walked each morning with a scarf pulled tight and the quiet crunch of frost beneath my boots. Read novels I'd put off for years, reorganized my kitchen cabinets with a satisfaction I never thought possible. I didn't speak to Greg, not out of spite, but because there was nothing left to say that wouldn't cost me something I no longer wished to spend. I sent Emma a card, just a short note. Thank you for remembering me when it wasn't convenient. That matters more than anything now. A week later, she called. We talked for an hour. Not about what had happened, but about small things. A student in her class who gave her a painted rock, a podcast about women over 60 starting vineyards, a new soup recipe. "I wish you were closer," she said at the end. "I'm working on that," I replied, and I meant it. In March, I sold the house. It surprised no one, except maybe me. I packed slowly, not out of reluctance, but because every drawer was a drawer of memory, and I wanted to say goodbye to each one properly. I donated the guest towels. I kept the fruitcake tin. Some things held stories worth carrying forward. I moved to a small town near the coast, found a rental with big windows and creaky floors, the kind of place that let in more light than noise. There was a porch with a swing I could sit on in the mornings with a blanket over my knees and no one asking what I was doing or when I'd be done. I started volunteering at the library, one afternoon a week, just shelving books and helping the older kids find things their teachers forgot to mention. One of them, a girl named Ava, called me Ms. E. It stuck. On my birthday, Emma visited. She brought daffodils and a pie. Not fruitcake, but lemon chess. "It's okay if I never liked the other one, right?" She laughed. I laughed too. Laughed harder than I had in years. That night, she asked if she could stay a few days. "I just want to be around you," she said. "It feels real here." And I realized that was the word I'd been missing all those years. Real. Not performative. Not polite. Not perform a grandma at dinner. Just real. We didn't talk about the rest of the family. Not out of avoidance, out of peace. Some stories don't need retelling. Some stories need replacing. In April, a letter arrived. Handwritten. Slanted cursive. From Ruby Gregg's oldest. I opened it at the kitchen table, hands steady. "Grandma, I know things got weird. I don't know what happened exactly. But I miss you. I remember your tea. I remember you brushing my hair after baths. I remember how you always let me talk, even when it made no sense. I hope you're happy. I hope you know I still think about you when I eat ginger cookies." There was a drawing folded inside. A teacup. A rocking chair. A fruitcake with a smiling face. I pressed it to my chest. Not tears, just warmth. I didn't reply right away. Some things are better answered by action. So I baked. For the first time in a long time, I made the fruitcake again. Not because someone asked, not to impress, just because it was mine. I wrapped it in parchment, tied it with red thread, and walked it down to the library. Gave it to Ava's grandmother, who'd just lost her husband. "Something sweet," I said. She touched my hand. "You're something sweet," she replied. That night I lit a candle. Opened the legacy folder one last time. Tucked Ruby's letter inside. Wrote one more line. "Let love inherit what the law never could." Then I closed it. I am not angry anymore. I'm not waiting anymore. I'm not knocking on closed doors asking for scraps of attention dressed up as tradition. I'm not the extra chair. I'm not the ride home. I'm not the guilt gift. I'm Eleanor, and I am home.